Don't call me a superstar the way I run you over with my car. Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the Game Skits. Today, and only today, I am here, that's right, to give you my review of Sonic Superstars. That's right, shocker, surprise. I have had the game for quite a bit of time now. I have played through it, and I am here to give you all my thoughts on the juicy details and everything about this game. Is it peak? Is it not? Is it crazy? We're about to find out. And make sure, guys, we are nearing 50k subscribers. If you've been enjoying all the content lately, please consider subscribing, join your boy, and enjoy all the content I'm going to be feeding you forever. Let's not dick around and let's get right into it, though. So Sonic Superstars was announced, what, like in June? And we already have it right here, and it's sort of the finale of this big Sonic year we've been having. And man, like, I cannot believe it's here. I cannot believe I played it. And let's obviously, I feel like we got to do this in segments. You guys know me, I'm a little sporadic with my thoughts, so you're gonna have to deal with me a little bit. But obviously, let's talk first and foremost, how does the game feel, right? Because obviously that's always a big question with 2D Sonic. It feels fantastic. If you're worried about any controls or how the game feels or looks, I wouldn't worry at all. I think the game, first of all, feels wise is perfect. I think Sonic plays exactly how you would expect him to. I think Amy does, I think Knuckles does, and even Tails. They all have the same moves you would expect, and they all move the way you would expect, and they all feel perfect. Like the way they sort of translated the Sonic Mania moveset, and obviously just old school Sonic moveset, to this modern 3D look is awesome. Like, I think it's very commendable how they actually nailed it. And honestly, the look of the game really, it ended up being really nice. I think there's definitely some of like the plastic look of just 3D models at points. You know, it doesn't necessarily feel as peak as a sprite-based Sonic game, you know, but it's definitely like a step up over, for example, like Sonic 4, you know, which is not a game we like to talk about. But I think this is, for 3D models, I think it looks really good. I mean, I'm showing you some of the levels here. I think some of the backgrounds really stand out. Some are better than others. I think the environments are cool to look at. There's definitely some like cheap looking stuff again, like sometimes the little fireballs look really ugly, or just some things look kind of but for the most part it's a really good looking game, and I just enjoyed looking at it and I enjoyed playing it. The feel of it is great. They nailed it. Do not worry about it. But this is a Sonic game, and this is also a 2D platformer, and we have to talk about the gameplay slash zone. So obviously it's a Sonic game. You know what the gameplay is to expect here in 2D. It is very much, you know, run from start to finish of the level. You have exploration bits. They're not levels that you're meant to just speed through. They're levels that, you know, you're trying to get to the higher path of, or stay on the lower path for different areas. You know, you're trying to get your Chaos Emeralds. It is very standard. You know, this game doesn't try to do anything off the walls, really. It does do a lot of gimmicks, though, right? Which I think is this game's sort of like double-edged sword that I think a lot of people are going to end up, you know, loving or having issues with, is the game tries a lot of gimmicks. So for example, there's one area called the Golden Capital, where, you know, one of the gimmicks is you're just standing on this platform, kind of like those sky levels in old Sonic games, and you're hitting things. Or there's a later level, what's called, or an earlier level in the game, you know, where you're brick breaking in a sky temple area, which I thought was really fun. And there's some levels later that kind of rely on arcadey stuff. Even the ones you've seen from the trailer, you know, like when you turn to the squid or the rocket. Like, the game definitely feels like it leans on a bit of gimmicks more often than not. And I think sometimes it's to its detriment, because there's times where I'm like, okay, I just kind of want to platform, you know, I kind of want to speed, and there's a lot of times the game kind of slows down the gameplay. Like, I feel like the first half of the game gives me a lot of moments, you know, where I can sort of run really fast as Sonic, and then the second half of the game has a lot more platforming. Now, I could be like placebo affecting myself into believing that like all old school Sonic games, you know, always had segments that would let you just kind of go fast and go wild, but they do oftentimes, even in the later half of later Sonic games, end up having you become platform heavy areas, you know. And I don't think there was ever a level that drove me insane. You know, there's always that one level in 2D Sonic that drives you insane. There is one later boss that gave me a panic attack, and there's definitely some challenge to the game, right? And I feel like they keep the zones at a fairly lengthy amount. You know, they never feel too short. They're never like a minute long. I feel like you, for the most part, especially if you're playing it, you know, I mean, obviously with Sonic games, you play them two ways, right? You either speed run the level, try to get through as fast as possible, or you try to sort of explore, you know, try to get the higher paths, try to get where you need to go. And I think for the most part, the levels are lengthy enough to adjust to that, right? And obviously, we have the zones in the game, right? You have Bridge Island Zone, which has sort of become not this iconic look, but like the image you sort of think about with the game. And that level I adore. I think that level is one of the best in the game. I still think it's a good mix of fun. It has unique mechanics. It's clever, it's enjoyable, it's got the big loops. That one is super fun. I love it, right? We got the green jungle area, which I thought was super fun, relying on a lot of the vines, and there's a lot of good jumps and good movements there. That level I thought was super fun. There's this beach level, which is super dope, relies on, you know, a lot of the slides you would expect from levels like Hydro City, or even Labyrinth Zone, kind of, where like, you know, you're going down like the sand, but obviously except this time it's a slide. So it definitely teeters on a lot of like familiarity of Sonic, like mechanics and ideas we've seen before, but it kind of modernizes them to be a little more fun. You know, there's even levels like the Golden Capital, which I thought was really cool. It's kind of like this golden city, and it's like it looks cool, and you're just getting a shit ton of rings consistently. I thought that was a super dope level. There's a level called like Press Factory, which is kind of like, you know, not Press Garden, but it's just a regular factory. And I think that's definitely like one of my weird things about the game, right? It's like you have all the levels you expect from Sonic, right? And they don't necessarily change the formula too much. I do love Pinball Carnival Zone. Pinball Carnival Zone is one of my favorites in the game, where like, you know, the first act of it, you know, has a, you know, just a fun sunny carnival, and then the second half of it turns into like a spooky carnival, where like the background has this, you know, dark Eggman with like green shining eyes, the music a little spooky. You're going on these rotating platforms, and it leans on that theme really well. So, well, again, the game never does anything crazy with its themes. It's stuff you expect. They're just really fun and enjoyable. Like, I had a great time going through them. I do think, here's one thing I will say right about the level design. You could definitely tell the game was designed with multiplayer. And what I mean by that is this game obviously has, you know, 2 to 4 player co-op, which technically means the levels need to have a bit more space. So because of that, it feels like sometimes there's just a lot of empty big rooms for the sake of, you know, fitting more players on the screen, which is always like my double-edged sort of why. Like, obviously on a fun friend note, like, it's cool to have 4-player co-op, but on a more like tight precision platforming based type beat, what's called having it be single player based is often better. Speaking of co-op, I actually played a shit ton of this game with Choctopus. I was out in New York playing the game with Choctopus, and that you know, review is gonna go up, but that playthrough is gonna go up with him later. But here's some footage of it. The multiplayer I thought was surprisingly fun. It works really well. The camera zooms out. It definitely leans towards the player that's, you know, the most forward in the level, and if someone basically backs down, they have to press X to sort of just bubble basically exactly to where you are. But it's fun. I feel like, especially if you're playing with someone who likes Sonic, you're gonna have a good time. I don't think little Timmies are gonna have fun playing it, because I feel like one person speeding through the level while the other kid is like, you know, trying to jump on a platform slowly is not gonna go well. They're gonna have to keep teleporting. So in some way it works. I feel like it works if you're playing with Sonic fans. If you're not, I think the other person is not gonna have a good time. Also, another thing about the zones and acts and everything is that each character has one specific unique act. So there's an act called Act Tails, Act Knuckles, Act Amy, and Act Sonic, where they're each their own unique level that's attributed to them. And I actually thought that was a great idea, because, you know, I feel like if someone just likes playing as one character, they have a reason to play as the other, and it's usually just for one level. You know, Amy has a cute level where, you know, she's going through and then she has to help Trip. There's one level obviously that relies on Knuckles' climbing in Golden Capital. There's a level that relies, you know, on Tails floating around a lot with his tail. So I feel like those were really cool, and they're really lengthy too. They did a good job with that. And I feel like a lot of the challenge comes from those. In fact, there's even like one of the levels, I think it's like one of the sky areas, I think it's like the 3rd level in the game. That level is just one act, and some of the worlds, I think there's like 2 or 3 levels in the game that are one act that are just really long. But it's a cool idea. I like the idea of one really long act. It's kind of like in Mario Kart, where like instead of like the 3-lap course, you just get one really long one. You're like, oh shit. Another thing about the gameplay is I appreciate how the levels, you know, Act 1 and 2 definitely have, you know, that different vibe, which I always like. You know, like in Bridge Island Zone, you know, Act 1 is sunny, Act 2 is sunset. In the carnival zone, it goes from like an orangey sky to a dark time sky. You know, in Press Garden, it goes from day to night. And the nighttime actually has this mechanic, like almost this survival mechanic, where like there's this timer going off behind you that Eggman has, and you have to press these buttons, you know, to stop it, which, you know, can be a little annoying, but, you know, it's a little stressful too in some good ways. But another big part of the gameplay here are the Chaos Emerald abilities. This is, you know, have been one of the new hooks and gimmicks that they've promoting, and honestly, I gotta say, I was surprised, you know, because I was someone who, when I initially played at Summer Games Fest, I got the water power, and I was like, okay, this is kind of whatever, and I got the clone power, which was like, okay, this is just for bosses, but I ended up loving a lot of the later ones you get, and I ended up actually using them and relying on them a lot. So for example, one of the powers I really love getting is Ivy. You know, it's this one where you can build a branch somewhere, and I really like that because sometimes I would just start a level or get to a level part, and I would just use Ivy to climb up to a certain area because there's a lot of higher up areas in Sonic, so that was fun to use. My favorite power by far is this power called Meteor/Bullet, where basically, you know, just for a period of time, you could just shoot yourself to different spots. I thought that was cool for movement and also for bosses. You know, there's a lot of times in the bosses, you could just, you know, swipe down and hit Eggman, or again, in levels, you could just go upwards or in any direction really quickly, and I really love that. In fact, the water power-up I thought was one of its best uses, because when you got to, you know, Goo Lagoon or whatever the fuck it's called, and you went into the water, you could use the water power, and your character would turn to like a little, you know, little water fish variant of it. And I thought that was awesome. It was hella adorable. The avatar ability that you've seen was good during bosses, where you could just, you know, get a free hit in there. Vision is the one where you can see invisible platforms. I thought that one was like the least useful, because I felt like unless the game prompted me to use it, which sometimes the game does, sometimes the game will be like, hey, use this power here, like it'll glow a little bit. I never saw really any use of it, but like, again, I could not tell you how many times during a boss fight or something that I ended up, you know, relying on one of those powers. And I think it is a good addition for them to add in. Also, there's also a character unique one. So Sonic has a homing attack, Knuckles has a cool punch, Amy has that hammer throw ability from Sonic Origins Plus in there, and Tails, I think, throws in some tornadoes. So typically they're all attack based, and which is really cool, and I think it's hella fun. It's nothing too crazy, but I think the Emerald powers overall were a good addition. You know, they're nothing to go crazy over. They're not things that change the level, but they're ones that definitely make you want to go back to earlier levels with them and sort of see what you can discover, what you can find with them. Because obviously with a Sonic game, a lot of it is, you know, based on replayability. You know, obviously with Sonic, you like to go back to levels and mess around. And also, by the way, of course, you do get Super Sonic for getting all the Chaos Emeralds. I'm not going to show Super Sonic because I know a lot of people like that first moment of seeing, you know, what he looks like and stuff. But yeah, you do get him for getting all the Chaos Emeralds, and it is absolutely worth it. And of course, what is classic Sonic without some bosses, right? This game is bosses plentiful. You know, a lot of Act 1s basically end on a boss, and Act 2 end on a boss. And honestly, a lot of them are actually super fun. I do think it's weird, right? I do like the sort of classic way of Sonic games where you can sort of just bash the boss a bunch and kind of gimp it. I always feel like that's sort of a charm of Sonic, but in this game, they sort of opt for, you know, more traditional bosses that have more to them. So you can get one hit in typically, and then they go into their next phase and their next phase. Now, there's ways to make the phases faster by using your abilities or hitting them faster, right? But for the most part, the game will be like, okay, you hit me, I'm going into, you know, my reload state to, you know, phase 2 or phase 3. So I thought there's definitely a lack of, you know, that old school classic charm of me being able to bash a boss fight. But I think for the sake of fun of them, it was a good idea. And some of them are new ideas. Some of them bring back old ideas. Like there's one monkey boss in there that tries to, you know, bring down floor platforms to crush you. There's stuff, you know, where there's this one boss that you have to, you know, get the vines back to hit him, which I thought were really cool. There's a clown boss in the carnival level where you have to, you know, activate all the buttons and then you can hit him. Or again, you could just use your power and go up to him and hit him. So there's a lot of cool bosses in there, and I do think they give you cool couple of ways to beat them. So for the most part, again, I don't want to spoil it, but the bosses were fun. There was nothing that drove me insane until the end of the game, of course, right? There's one final boss that you guys will see. The code word I'll use is web, and that'll drive you a little bit insane. But besides that, I think the bosses are varied and they're fun. Now, while I'm also on the topic of gameplay, I do have to acknowledge this game definitely has bugs, right? And I wish that wasn't the case, but it is, right? There was one notable bug I have where, like, if you finish a level and go to the shop and then leave the shop after a few button presses, you would get like terminated from the map. There was one glitch I saw my friends when they were playing the game in 4 players where they were in permanence of the drowning noise, or like the drowning state even when they were out of water. There was, you know, some moments where, you know, the platforms were clipping. There's definitely some jank in there, which again is not something I like. I wish that wasn't in there. Maybe there's gonna be a day 1 patch, but there's definitely a few moments where I'm like, okay, like even sometimes you'll hit an enemy to a boss and it'll kind of like move to them weirdly. There's definitely bugs in there, and I do hope they fix them. But again, for the most part, game stays at 60 FPS solid the whole time. But there is gonna be bugs, and someone is gonna put a clip on Twitter being like, I can't believe they released the game in this state, like they always do. And of course, how could I talk to you about a Sonic game without talking about the music, right? And there's been a lot of discussion about this soundtrack, and I think for the most part, it's good. It is nothing crazy. I definitely don't understand what T. Lopes meant when he said this is his best work, but I thought there was a lot of great tracks. I think Bridge Island's a banger track. I thought even what's called Speed Jungle was a great one. Pinball really Carnival stands out super well. I love the Desert Song. The Desert Song like is one of my highlights of the game. There's one of the later songs in the 9th zone of the game, but I gotta say Mega L on the boss theme. Oh my god, the boss theme is the most obnoxious song. It is so lame. It is so Sonic 4 synthy, and I think there's some levels in the game that definitely have that. I don't know. I think it's Jun Senway that does a lot of the soundtracks with T. Lopes here. I feel like you can definitely tell when like T. Lopes is in charge versus when Jun is, because like there's that level Press Factory Zone where I felt like the music was kind of lame and whatever, and I thought like, for example, the Lagoon stage was kind of whatever, but then again you get to like the desert level and I'm like, okay, this is kind of a banger, right? And of course, you know, your Bridge Islands and your Speed Jungles and your Carnivals, like there's a lot of songs, and actually Speed Carnival isn't even by T. I believe it's one of the composers of the Sonic cyberspace level themes. But regardless, I feel like the music is definitely a mixed bag. You know, there's some bangers. There's nothing like everywhere I'm offended except for the boss theme. Yeah, for the most part, the soundtrack isn't going to blow you away, but it's great. There are some bangers in there, and of course, you know, hearing them on your own as opposed to in the levels, a lot of times it's going to enhance your experience with listening to them. Now, without getting into spoilers, let's talk a little bit about story in here. The game definitely has a story. It's very light. You know, it does the classic Sonic thing where you have, you know, light cutscenes in there, but it's cute for the most part. There are some cool reveals in there. Obviously, you know, a lot of people want to know what's going on with Trip, so there are some cool reveals in there, and there's some cool surprises story-wise, but for the most part, it's kind of just like cute little cutscenes. But yeah, for story, it's nothing crazy. Obviously, it's classic Sonic, but there's some cool inclusions in there, including some cool unlocks and stuff like that. I don't want to get into the extras too much because I feel like that's when I get into spoiler territory, but rest assured, there is a really good replay value for beating the game. You know, there's a really good one in there for beating the game, and I think the battle mode is something I messed with a little bit. I didn't get too much time with, but it's fun. It's exactly kind of what you expected. You go, you do some races, you fight some little bots. You can customize the bot by getting coins in the campaign, and also I forgot even to talk about the special stages to get the Chaos Emeralds. So to get the Chaos Emeralds, you need to do these special stages where you're like swinging to get to the Chaos Emeralds. I thought that was a really good special stage. It ended up being actually one of my favorites because there's definitely some layers of strategy to them, but they never drive you insane the way some of the older ones do. I would say they're probably the easiest ones yet in the series, if I'm being honest with you, but I'd still think it was a good idea to do this sort of like 3D level where you're, you know, swinging on not necessarily vines or whatever you want to call them. But yeah, I feel like I've been talking a lot about the game, but man, let me tell you my thoughts on the game from start to finish. I loved it. I thought it was a super great 2D Sonic game, and I'm sure a lot of people's big question is, where does this rank amongst them? I wouldn't say this is the peak of 2D Sonic. You know, I would say this is a great entry. I would even say, like, for example, for me, baby, it would be like Mania is still #1. Sonic 3 and Knuckles would be like, you know, #2. I could argue that, like, for me, I have a big attachment to CD, so I would put CD right under, and then I would put this game, and then I would put Sonic 2, and then I would put Sonic 1, then I put Sonic 4. So pretty good ranking for me. It's a game that I think I'm gonna go back to a bunch. It's a game obviously I have to process. It's also a 2D Sonic game, which means I have to play with every character. I have to go back and revisit it a bunch, and I have to play in 4-player co-op on stream because that'll be fun. There's a lot of ways that's going to be, you know, enjoyed with this game, but overall, man, I think think they cooked something really fun. And I feel like this is the first Sonic game in a while where I'm not like, this is building a foundation for a great future. It's like, no, like, this was a game they made from start to finish, and it was fire. Also, something fun, I just want to show you guys the little costumes here. This feels very surreal, running around as feels, or the Lego versions of the characters. I hope they do more costumes like this because I think they're super fun. And also, the price comes up, right? $60 for this game. The campaign takes, I would say, about 4 hours, including, you know, some extra cool thing. I would say maybe your length of the main game would be maybe 8 to 9 hours if you wanted to do everything. Now, if you want to do everything, like the battle mode, getting, you know, rankings up and doing the campaign with everyone, maybe you would spend like 20 hours overall. But for the most part, I think, you know, main campaign being 4 hours makes sense for a Sonic game. I don't necessarily think you need this at $60. You could probably maybe wait till it's 40 on Black Friday. But obviously, I think if you're a big Sonic fan, you're going to buy this regardless. And I think it's worth the money. I think it's fun. I think it's got a lot of replay value. Like I said, I think they knew that and they wanted to design it around that. But yeah, overall, I really love this game. I think it's fun. I think it's dope. I think it stands up with a 2D Sonic as a series in general. And while I do think it has bugs and it definitely lacks in full creativity, it's still fun, it's still varied, it's still got some good shit in there. And Fang and Trip are my babies. So thank y'all for watching, guys. You are the best. Make sure you let me know what you guys think of the game or any questions you have, and I will answer them down below. Thank y'all for watching. You're the best. Peace out. I love you.